Ready na, Father Iking. Go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CEAP. Hello, everyone. A blessed morning to all the administrators, faculty, personnel, and students of the CEAP member schools all over the Philippines. I am Father Iking Balongag, the CEAP Vice President, and I will be your moderator today. Welcome to our webinar on 500 years of the coming of Christianity in the Philippines and the journey of Catholic education all through the centuries. This webinar is part of our CEAP at 80 celebration. Let us begin our webinar with an opening prayer and remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we praise, glorify, and thank you for the gift of your Son and the gift of the Christian faith. 500 years have passed, and by your grace, we have stood even much stronger despite constant threats coming from all sides and forces. Bless the Filipino people and their missionary work. Continue to use them in bringing the Christian faith and the gospel to all the corners of the globe, that every tongue may proclaim the lordship of your Son, and every life may give witness to and be a model of the gospel of love. This we pray in Jesus our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Once again, good morning and welcome to our webinar on the 500 years of the coming of Christianity in the Philippines and the 500 years of Catholic education. In his homily last March 14th at the St. Peter's Basilica, to celebrate the 500th year of Christianity in the Philippines, Pope Francis wonderfully spoke of the joy of the gospel received by Filipinos. That is evident in the joy in your eyes, on your faces, in your songs, and in your prayers, and with which you bring your faith to other lands. The Holy Father further observes that in Rome, Filipino women are smugglers of faith because wherever they go to work, they sow the faith. And he makes an appeal to preserve this blessed infectiousness and to persevere the work of evangelization, not proselytism, which is something else. The Christian proclamation that we have received needs to be constantly brought to others. He would say, today, we recall the growth of the Church in the Philippines and the growth of Catholic education in a span of 500 years, and how these two institutions have responded over time to the call to evangelize in the Philippines and in the world. We shall try to trace the joy that is evident in the Filipino. Is it a logical consequence of the mix between the Christian faith and the Filipinos' natural qualities? Or has joy that is innate in the gospel grown deeply in the soul of every Filipino as a result of the nurturing in one's faith? Before we proceed, however, allow me to give you some reminders. For those who just turned in with us, we welcome you to the webinar. We are live both on the CEAP Facebook page and the CEAP channel on YouTube. But remember the following. First, as the talk is ongoing, we encourage you to post your questions or comments at the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. And I will ask these questions or read the comments during the Q&A portion. Second, people have been asking about certificates. We get a lot of queries about certificates. Please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link has already been posted as part of the caption of this video, both on YouTube and Facebook. But please note that the link will only go live from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. So if you click it now, it is not going to open. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within 3 to 5 days. Finally, please be reminded as well that this is a free webinar brought to you in partnership with Tech Factors. Again, we are giving this to you for free. But if you want to pay it forward, you may donate to our Kapatiran Kamagong Fund. It is our fund for helping the poor and struggling CEAP mission schools because we heal as one. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks with the hashtags #CEAP Cares and #I Love Catholic Ed. To serve as our resource person this morning for our webinar is a church historian who earned his bachelor's degree in church history and cultural patrimony of the church at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, Italy, magna cum laude. And later, he is licentiate in church history from the same university, summa cum laude. He is currently teaching at the Maryhill School of Theology, an assistant parish priest at the Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in UP Village. Let us all welcome, with a virtual round of applause, the man who wrote all the reflections in the Bible diary for the year 2020, Father Jonathan A. Bitoy, CMF.
Good morning, everyone. Before anything else, let me share screen so that you can see my slides. And I would like to thank CEAP for having me in this webinar. It's indeed a great pleasure to be one of your speakers and a great honor at that. And so the topic that was given to me was 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines and the journey of Catholic education. By way of introduction, I'm going to enlarge my outputs. There you are. So by way of introduction, let me say that education in the Philippines has undergone several stages of development from the pre-Spanish times to the present. So our education started during the pre-colonial age, where we have our own native educational systems. And basically, we have an informal, unstructured, and devoid of methods type of education. Children were provided more vocational training by their parents and in the houses of tribal tutors. And who are these tribal tutors? These are the wise men and women of the village. Parents are hands-on in the education of their children. The fathers, for example, train their sons in how to hunt and other means of livelihood. The mothers oversaw their girls and instruct them on household chores. This type of education was to prepare both boys and girls to become good husbands and wives in the future. So in this scenario, we can see that there is a partnership between parents and teachers. There is a link between what they taught. And therefore, the teachers are not just professionals who are set aside whose main task is to teach, but parents are also teaching their own children. Perhaps this is where we got the idea of Parents Teachers Association. It has been practiced since time immemorial in the Philippines. The teachers at the time were the babaylan and the hatalonan. These are the wise men and the wise women of the village, gifted with wisdom and knowledge and spirituality and the system of running down their own society. They were respected by the people of the society. Therefore, the type of education that was taught was one of beliefs and traditions. It was the economic situation during the pre-colonial times that shaped much of the system of education in the Philippines. It was communal to Asiatic feudalism before Spanish colonization. So you will see that also operative in the greater Asian region. With their practical and subsistent mode of production, they had to provide education that was plain and simple. So there was hardly a type of specialization that we have at the present time in the early pre-colonial Philippine communities. On the other hand, preparing them to be good members of the community rests on the hands of the wise men and women of the community. And the medium of instruction used was alibata, the native alphabet. So having said that, the literacy rate of early Filipinos was fairly high. Many attest to this, such as Pedro Chirino, a Jesuit historian who wrote in his 1604 Relación de las Filipinas. All these islanders are much given to reading and writing, and there's hardly a man, much less a woman, who does not read and write. So historically, we have a high literacy rate, and it is evenly distributed between men and women. And if we look at our present society, the same thing holds. Literacy rate, a definition of which would be 15 years old who can read and write, is fairly high in the Philippines. It's hovering around 98 to 99%. And among these, women have a slightly higher literacy rate at around 51, where the men would be around 49%. And I guess it's because historically, we had been a highly literate society. Also, Antonio Morga wrote in the 1609, Sucesos, Las Islas Filipinas. Almost all the natives, both men and women, write in this language. There are very few who do not write it excellently and correctly. So that is a high praise coming from a third-party observer telling us that our foreparents are highly literate and they can write excellently and correctly, meaning their handwriting skills are also something to marvel at. To some, the educational system of pre-colonial Philippines was informal and structured, are the words best used to describe the education in the Philippines during the pre-Spanish era. The type of education was not institutionalized, and separate institutions for education were not in place. Specialization education also did not exist. However, specialization in skills are present, such as in jewelry making, where early Filipino jewelers excelled a lot. If you happen to go to Ayala Museum, where they have a display of pre-Spanish Filipino jewelry made of gold, you will marvel at the artistry of our ancestors. Also, we have known for a fact that Boat making and weaponry such as swords and lantakas are also in the skills repertoire of early Filipinos. This is a krakatao, and it is a war boat that is habitually produced by Filipinos, especially those coming from Cavite and Pampanga. And look at the boat, it can hold a lot of warriors. So this is used for raidings of other villages and communities in pre-Spanish time. And it is well made. Filipinos are very known to be good boat makers. Scribes also exist in early Filipino society that records almost anything. Example of which is a contract written in this copper plate. The plate was found in 1989 by a laborer near the mouth of the Lumban River in Wawa, Lumban, Laguna, in the Philippines. The inscription was written in Old Malay using the Kawi script with Sanskrit and Old Japanese influences. So who wrote that? The scribes. And so, although we don't have formal schooling at the time with specializations, I guess what happened would be individual mentorship of a master craftsman. So, by way of summary, the early pre-colonial Filipino education prepares him or her for life and proper integration to his or her community. Children studied not for material advantage, but education was seen as a necessary progress for adult social life. So we now go into the Spanish period. What was the education of the time? And this is where we will see a lot of influences coming from Catholic education. The education system of the archipelago changed during the Spanish time. It became a formal system. So before it was informal, during the Spanish time, it became a formal system. The first Christian school built in the Philippines was mandated by the Augustinians and established in Cebu in 1565. So we almost have how much? 441 years of Catholic education in the Philippines. And the first Catholic school was established by the Augustinians in Cebu. The establishment of schools from the primary level to the tertiary level education came about all because of the religious congregations. So we have to thank the big four, that would be the Augustinians, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and then later on the Jesuits. These four single-handedly educated the Filipinos, our foreparents, of course, in the European system of education at the time. Christian doctrines were the main focus of these schools. So the Doctrina Christiana was the primer catechism manual at the time, because the rediscovery of the Philippines by the Europeans happened after the Council of Trent. And in the Council of Trent, they codified the faith of the Catholic Church, and that would be the Christian doctrine, written by Cardinal Bellarmine, who is also a Jesuit. So the schools for boys and girls were separate, so there was segregation of the sexes, and King Philip II's law of the Indies instructed the Spanish authorities in the Philippines to educate the natives, to teach them how to read and write, and to learn Spanish. But it was impossible to carry out the latter due to the limited number of friars based in the Philippines who could teach the language, the vast diversity of ethno-linguistic provenance of the people, and the archipelagic nature of the country simply made it impossible. Faced with these problems, so the friars, the vanguard of evangelization education, found an alternative, which was to learn the native languages first so that they could use them as tools to evangelize and teach the natives in the missionary schools. So let us remember that the first Catholic schools were missionary schools. They are hardly earning, as a matter of fact, they are expenses that is subsidized directly by the King and the Queen of Spain through the missionaries. And since the missionaries are few, they have to learn the language of the people that they minister, and perhaps also so that they can teach some Filipinos to help them in the management of the schools. As a result, the Spanish missionaries established schools immediately on reaching the islands, and wherever they penetrated, church and school went together. There was no Catholic village without its school, and young people, all young people attended this school. The priests and monks worked together with the civil authorities. They also began to create a network of primary schools whereby both religious and secular subjects were taught. So in this case, you will see that there was a partnership between the civil and the religious people of the time. And with regard to higher education, the students graduated with a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor in Arts degree. So it was more of a humanities and a Bachelor of Arts degree. Foremost among the schools for higher education established by the missionaries were the seminaries, a school for the formation of clergies that would continue the evangelizing mission. Of course, the seminaries are not just for those who would become priests, because many also left the seminary afterwards, but they got the seminary training. So in a way, we could call seminaries as not only a formative center for would-be priests, but also boarding schools for young men desiring to have education in their life. And I would say that the education in seminaries were quite good, especially in the areas of the arts and humanities. So the young men of the early Spanish times until towards the end of the Spanish rule, who were graduates of the seminaries, were able to imbibe culture because they have a good education inside these seminaries. And Bishop Domingo Salazar, who is an Augustinian, who in the year 1581 expressed to the King of Spain the need for a college to educate priests, which later opened in 1596 as the Jesuit College of San Ignacio de Manila. It was first called Colegio de Manila and was renamed Colegio de San Ignacio in 1626, in memory, of course, of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Society of Jesus. In 1621, the Colegio de Manila was authorized by Pope Gregory XV to the Archbishop of Manila to confer degrees in theology and the arts. Colegio de San Jose, the forerunner of San Jose Seminary, was also established in the early 1600s. It is still in operation until now inside Ateneo de Manila University. So I have classmates coming from there. We both studied together in the Loyola School of Theology. Real y Consideral Colegio de San Carlos in Manila was established in 1702. It is also operating until now. And Real Seminario de San Carlos in Cebu, founded in 1583, it is now called Seminario Mayor de San Carlos. So these are the seminaries that were founded in the early time. Casa de Clerigos in Naga was founded in 1793. It is now called Holy Rosary Minor Seminary. So it is still in existence. And Seminario de San Pablo was founded in 1882 in Vigan. Today it is called Immaculate Conception School of Theology, Vigan. Then we have the Seminario de San Vicente Ferrer, also known as San Vicente Ferrer Seminario or Saint Vincent. It's a college seminary of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Haro, located in Iloilo City. It was founded in 1869 and is the first institution of higher education in the Western Visayas. In 1862, the Vincentian Fathers came to the Philippines by virtue of the 1852 royal decree of Queen Isabella II of Spain in order to administer the conciliar seminaries of Manila, Naga City, Cebu City, Iloilo City, and Bigan, the seminaries that I have shown you, and to take care of the religious and scientific instruction of the diocesan seminarians and lay students in colegio seminaries. So here, we have seen that the seminaries are not only for the seminarians, but also for lay students. So in a way, it was an avenue for the transmission of the Catholic faith, because I'm sure the lay students who later on went out carried with them a solid Catholic formation, of course, according to the spirit of the times. Other higher schools for education were founded afterwards. And that would be, for example, Colegio de San Ildefonso in Cebu in 1598 was founded. And then we have in 1589, when the government entrusted the Escuela Pia to the Jesuits. Later, this was called Ateneo de Municipal, which is now the famous Ateneo de Manila University. And after the Jesuits, the Dominicans also claimed their reputation as they established one of the best universities in the Philippines, the University of Santo Tomas, which was opened in 1611. Its full title would be Real y Pontifical Universidad de Santo Tomas. So the Royal and Pontifical University of St. Thomas. Why royal? Because of the decree of the King and Queen of Spain. That's why it is a royal school. Why pontifical? Because of the Catholic mandate that was given to the Dominicans and the recognition of their school by the Vatican. Well, we now call it the Vatican, by Rome at the time. So it became pontifical. So around 1630, another university was set up, built especially for orphan boys, called the San Juan de Letran. So it's still in operation, and it was built not for the elites, but for the orphan boys of Manila. And compared with the boys, it took a little time to establish schools and colleges for girls. In 1589, Colegio de Santa Potenciana was opened for girls. This was the first school and college for girls. And following the birth of the first school for women, Colegio de Santa Isabel opened in 1632. And the religious congregations instituted Beaterio, that would be the female religious congregation. The sole purpose of this was to provide education for orphan girls who could not afford to educate themselves. The lessons taught there were basically about household tasks such as cooking, embroidery making, sewing, and other skills necessary for good housekeeping. So it's basically a domestic course. And the oldest universities and the first modern public education system in Asia was created during the Spanish colonial period. So there you are. Spain brought to us the first formal school system, and we are the first modern public education system in Asia. The public school system in the Philippines was born in 1863 with the passage of the Education Reform Act in the Spanish courts. Due to the compulsory education of Filipino children, separate schools for boys and girls were established at every pueblo. The law also implemented the training of both male and female teachers after the establishment of the Escuela Normal. So the normal schools actually comes from the Spanish period. And they were put up in order to train male and female teachers who would people and man this public school system that was decreed in 1863. The primary syllabus of the Spanish educational system would be the following: Christian doctrine and sacred history. So that would be religion, actually. They have elementary Spanish, general history and geography of Spain, of course, that's the mother country, writing and reading in the vernacular, arithmetic, practical agricultural vocal music, and rules of deportment, what we now call good manners and right conduct. For girls, domestic training was to replace agriculture in Spanish geography and history. Furthermore, there existed 56 secondary schools by the end of the Spanish colonization. Some were dating from the 16th century and intended originally for Spanish pupils, but later opened for Filipinos as well. So a word about deportment, or good manners and right conduct. Incidentally, in the 19th century, eh, especially the second half of the 19th century, that would be 1850s and up, the minister for religion at the time is our founder, Saint Anthony Mary Claret. So he has great influence in the colonies of Spain. So one of his books that would be the well-instructed young lady was used as a textbook for the deportment for girls. I think Sister Jo Mananzan had placed in her history book that it was part of the transformation of the mujer indígena, meaning the native Filipina girls. They are being trained to be according to the likeness and image of the Spanish colonizers. And they used the book of our father founder, Saint Anthony Mary Claret. The secondary schools comprised normal schools for both boys and girls, a school of agricultural practice, a college of medicine and pharmacy, a painting school, a nautical school, and 6 seminaries for theological training. So I already mentioned the seminaries, from Naga to Vigan to Iloilo to Manila, etc. So after elementary, they immediately go to the secondary schools where they are trained for agriculture as a vocational course. And if they want to go to college, medicine and pharmacy, fine arts and nautical schools. Higher education was given at the University of Manila. The university was founded in 1619 as the College of St. Thomas with the right to grant degrees in theology and philosophy. From 1734, students could graduate in law, medicine, and mathematics as well. So what we have here would be the primary schools that would be like elementary school during our time. And afterwards, the secondary schools wherein they were taught vocational training that would probably correspond to our grades 11 to 12 right now. And then if they graduate from there, they can proceed to college, which would be a higher degree at the time. And then they can earn, their bachelor in medicine and mathematics, and also law as well. So, in sum, the Filipino education system during the Spanish era is more of humanities and the liberal arts. The religious aspect of education is greatly emphasized due to the massive presence of the church in the educational system of the country. The function of the school was to train pupils as members of a Christian society. So the Catholic education carried this mandate very well, and not to help them improve themselves in the material world, just like the educational system of pre-colonial times. According to Blair, it was clear that by the end of the 19th century, the Philippines were more developed than any other country in Southeast Asia with respect to educational facilities. In addition, the archipelago pioneered in female education. And we have to thank the religious congregations who labored on this aspect, on the educational ministry. It was their genius, of course, that schools were introduced little by little to the archipelago. And probably from hindsight, we might criticize the kind of curriculum that they have, but that was the spirit of the time. Okay? You could not expect them to deviate from that. There would be instances, there would be a flash of brilliance where they would propose something radical, but by and large, the discipline of the time is so strong that they have to toe the line eventually. And so, because of the Spanish presence, the Philippines was more developed than any other country in Southeast Asia with respect to education, and we pioneered female education. So let us now go to the Catholic education during the American period. So the American Catholics were concerned when the United States acquired the Philippines and decided to establish the public school system. Okay, so there's an existing public school system in the Philippines as mandated by the royal decree. But the problem is this public school system is in the hand of religious. So there is not much difference between public schools and private schools at that time. But with the coming of the Americans, the ball game will radically change. Public schools become really public schools. And we will get to the mystery of that later on. And you will be surprised, that it was the late American Catholics who show more concern as to how education in the Philippines will proceed after American colonization. With their motive to spread their cultural values, specifically the English language, to the Filipino people, education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government, and they used it as a tool to fulfill their vision. Okay, so on the part of the Spanish colonizers, perhaps, and we could see that in some of their documents, that education was really used to further the vision of the conquering nation at the time. Not much has changed when the Americans took over. They also used education as a tool to fulfill their own vision for the Philippines. And the Americans revised the Spanish educational system by first introducing English as the official medium of instruction. Now, we might compare and contrast Spanish and American approach with regard to education, but remember, during the Spanish time, they have to lay the ground of the educational system. They lack manpower. When the Americans came, there is already an educational system, and therefore they have the leisure of at the same time teaching the English language, and they have more people to do that compared to the Spanish colonizers at the time. They have free education to all, which was also a Spanish, policy, especially towards the end of the 19th century, in order to educate society as a whole, remove religious elements from the education system. So that's what happened when you have a public school system. And all subsidies on religious education were removed. And lastly, there was no racial distinction, which resulted in Western pupils being classmates with Filipino children. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that during the Spanish times, of course, there were, public school system in the 19th century, but there were some schools that are exclusive, and therefore only the Filipino elites could enter there. And that's why you can hardly see an ordinary Filipino entering these prestigious schools. But with the coming of the Americans, they put up a school with no distinction, especially on the area of race and also of economic status. And that's why you have now a multicultural school setting during the Spanish time. The school system, it was built up by primary, intermediate, secondary, and tertiary education. So what we have here is the introduction of the intermediate uh, education system. In the Spanish times, we have only primary, secondary, and then later on tertiary or the university education. The elementary grade comprises primary schools with 3 standards, that means 3 years, and intermediate schools with 4 standards. After finishing intermediate school, students could apply for high school with 4 standards. So you have in the elementary, in our present time, it would be 7 years. No? That is comprised of primary and intermediate school. And then for the secondary, you have 4 years. That would be our high school for the day. And then afterwards, you will have uh, you will have uh, college, or vocational schools. After finishing intermediate school, students could apply for high school with 4 standards. Okay, so after accomplishing high school, a student could apply for vocational school or university. So this is what the Americans really introduced. Okay? Vocational technical schools in the Philippine education system. The vocational schools can be divided into 4 main types. Normal school giving instruction in plumbing, carpentry, and telegraphy. Nautical school, trade school, or agricultural school. In 1918, the Philippines had 2 universities at which students could apply for 8 different courses. Okay. But for the vocal Catholic minority in the US, it posed a risk of weakening the results of 300 years of Catholic activity in the islands. Okay? I mean, the introduction of the American public school system. And so, the US lay Catholics are very vocal in their criticism. They are small, unorganized, and not supported by the US Catholic Church hierarchy. Basically, the bishops of the United States at the time were silent. They do not issue any declaration about the educational system of the colonies. So the task fell on the shoulders of lay US Catholics. But they nevertheless succeeded in influencing and changing the educational policies established in the Philippines. Why? Because they vigorously campaigned to what they perceived as policies inimical to the Filipino Catholic majority, especially with regard to education. So Catholic schools who were present during the American time, or those that were built during American time, have, they have a debt of gratitude to this vigorous campaign of lay US Catholics on behalf of the interests of these Catholic schools. They question of teachers sent to the Philippines, whether they are Catholic or not. The leadership of the Schumann Commission, being not Catholic, and later the TAP Commission, passed to evaluate and give recommendations regarding the governance and education of the Philippines after it was ceded to the US by Spain in the Treaty of Paris in 1898. So they questioned the teachers because most of the teachers sent actually were non-Catholics. They were Protestants. The composition, the Schumann Commission, that looked into the educational system of the Philippines later on, taken over by the TAP Commission, the majority are non-Catholics. And therefore, they see this inimical to the interest of Catholic school education in the Philippines. The leadership of the superintendent of schools in Manila, for example, were seriously scrutinized by the Catholic lobby groups in the United States, as well, fearful that a non-Catholic might initiate anti-Catholic initiatives. So there was animosity really on the way the American government is trying to shape Filipino education during the occupation of the Americans. And then the question of school ownership and property between the American government and the schools in the hands of the Catholic Church was a thorny issue. Why? As I said, there was a public school system in the Philippines towards the latter half of the 19th century, as decreed by the royal decree of Spain, but they were still in the hands of the church or religious congregations. So it seemed like only public school system in name. And when the Americans took over, they wanted to identify these public schools that were in the hands of the church and the religious, and it was a thorny issue. The American government negotiated directly with the Vatican. They could not do it here in the Philippines. Under Pope Leo XIII, that led to fairly amicable settlements. That's why some schools reverted to the hands of the government. Some schools remained in the hands of the Catholic Church or religious congregation. It is at this time when the public system education was being placed that the question of religious instruction was also tackled. The so-called, catechism or religion class. Governor Taft decreed as a compromise that religious instruction be allowed 3 times a week to those whose parents requested it. It must be given by an authorized priest or minister under the supervision, of course, of the school authorities. It was a compromise because, again, the US lobby groups, the lay Catholics there were very, very vocal in their opposition to remove religion in school curriculum. Another minor incident was the removal of all religious symbols in the public schools. Today, we might not have problem with that, but at the time, it was an emotional issue. The Catholics in the US see this as an effort to Protestantize the Filipinos. So there was vociferous opposition, and it was a birth plan of the public school system in the Philippines. So there was a Protestant Catholic tension regarding the education of the Filipino people brought by the influx of Protestant missionaries in the US colony and the putting up of Protestant schools in the islands considered as a threat by the US Catholics. And so let us later on see what are these Protestant schools placed by Protestants in the Philippines during the US occupation. The Protestant missionary activity in the islands were brought by the defeat of the Spanish in the Battle of Manila Bay by the US Navy Asiatic Squadron. The Presbyterian Baptist and Methodist leaders met in 1898 in New York to discuss how to bring Protestantism to the Philippines. The result was a committee agreement that divided Philippines into missionary areas by denomination to avoid future conflicts among themselves and their converts. Only one Protestant denomination would be in each area. So this is called the committee agreement by the Presbyterian, the Baptist, and Methodist leaders who met right after the triumph of the Americans versus the Spaniards. So these are the institutions that were founded during American occupation. So we have Silliman University, which is still in function until now. We have the Central Philippine University in 1905, which is still functioning until now. Actually, it is respected in Western Visayas. We have the Philomere Christian University, okay, and we have the Adventist University of the Philippines, which is not and we have the Philippine Christian University. I think it's still in operation. The Wesleyan University Philippines, still in operation, and then West Negros University. If you look at it, majority of these schools were in the Visayas. Okay, the Silliman, we have the Central Philippine School, Central Philippine University, and then the Philomere Christian University, and also the West Negros University. So they concentrated more their presences in the Visayas. I don't know the reason why, but perhaps it's because it's very hard to penetrate Manila and Luzon for that matter because of the heavy presence of the Catholic hierarchy here. The Archbishop of Manila, the Metropolitan, okay, the so-called patriarch of the Philippine Catholic Church is based in Manila, which is in Luzon. So during this transition from one colonial government to another, the Philippine Catholic education being defended by concerned lay. Interesting developments happen in educational institutions. We have first the coming of the first sisters of St. Polycarp in Dumaguete, Negros Oriental in 1904. Perhaps this is the answer to the Silliman University that was being placed in that area. So they came during the US occupation. And also the Sisters of St. Paul put up their own university in Iloilo, probably to counteract the Central Philippine University presence in there. And in 1906, the first four German Benedictine sisters and one novice from Tutzing, Germany, founded Saint Scholastica College. Okay, so two female congregations putting up schools, of course, first for female students. And third, the coming of the LaSalle brothers. The brothers of the Christian schools, known as LaSalle brothers, opened their first school in the Philippines on General Luna Street in Manila in 1911. So this is the famous De La Salle University. And during the American occupation, in 1941, these Catholic education institutions organized itself into an association called the Catholic Education Association of the Philippines to be able to collectively respond not only to urgent educational issues, but also social issues. So probably it was the call of the time for all the Catholic schools to band together so they would have, bargaining parity with the government that was under the American rule and heavily Protestant in nature. SAYAP was initiated by Bishop Michael J. O'Doherty, himself an accomplished educator, with Monsignor Jose Jovellanos as the first president and the founder of, I think, one of the schools in Manila, the Sanctum, the Holy Child, I guess. He is the founder. I saw that he was, he was hailed as the founder of such school. So we have two brilliant school administrators because they have, in a way, experience handling schools who thought of putting up an educational association in order for the Catholic schools to have stronger voice in terms of, dialogue with the government. So let us take a look at the founder, Archbishop O'Doherty, who came from Ireland. And he went to the Philippines in 1916, first as the Archbishop of Zamboanga, and he died in 1949 as the Archbishop of Manila, making him the longest to hold the post, serving through the difficult years of the Japanese occupation and the Second World War. He was also the founder of Manila Cathedral School. And why was he, an educator? Because in his early life, we can see that he was the professor at the St. Matthew's College, where he earlier studied and elevated the college into one of Ireland's more prominent educational institutions. So he has a knack for school management. And the proof is he made his alma mater prominent educational institution. So with this accomplishment, he was appointed by the Council of Irish Bishops as rector of the Irish College in Salamanca, Spain. So Salamanca University is a consortium of different colleges coming from Europe, because remember, Salamanca is one of the four famous universities of the medieval times. Okay, so together with Bologna, Oxford, Salamanca, and then another that I completely forgotten already. Okay. So under his leadership, he restored the ancient glory of the school, which he directed for 7 years. Okay. So the Irish College of Salamanca, was also famous because of his leadership. So no wonder that he thought of putting up an association that would cater to the needs of the Catholic schools especially during the government of the Americans, where public school systems were introduced. So the hold of Catholics in education loosened, and most of all, government funds that used to support Catholic education was withdrawn. And the growth through the years of Catholic Education Association in the Philippines somehow mirrored the state of Catholic education in the country. So I have articulated here some of the birthing passages of Sayap, okay? But I would like to skip it for the interest of focusing on Catholic education. Okay. Anyway, you can download my slides if you're interested about it later on. You can just ask Sayap for that. So let me focus on what transpired during the Catholic education of American times. First, rehabilitation of schools after the Second World War, on which Sayap again played a prominent role, lobbying for funds coming from the US governments, and also, begging from Catholics all over the world. So the schools basically were destroyed here in Manila, especially after the bombing of Manila, and therefore rehabilitation has to take place. And the schools here in Manila, you know, uh, Manila has a great concentration of schools, especially Catholic schools. The second, struggle of the Catholic education was autonomy from government control, since the U.S. have a kind of policy that curriculum, the payment of the teachers should be according to their standards. And, especially on the curriculum side, the Catholic schools find it very hard because they have their own vision for Catholic education, which simply sometimes is not agreeable to the American vision. And that's why, we need an association to lobby in behalf of the Catholic schools. Third, Catholic schools at that time have problem of economic survival, especially of the smaller mission schools, since government support was withdrawn, and therefore they have to live according to their own means. And I guess this is something that we must highlight at present society because they only look at the big three schools of the Catholic education. That would be La Salle, Ateneo, and the UST, Santo Tomas. And since these are famous schools, okay, tuitions are quite, high. They thought that all Catholic schools are like that. They are missing the point. Many of our Catholic schools are smaller mission schools. And even if they have good buildings, because they have donors, but operations on how to run the schools depended mostly on the income that would come from the tuition fees of their pupil. And you know that they have problems sometimes in coming up with the right number of students to operationalize the school management. And secondly, collecting. Okay? It's a very big problem because they are torn between education as a social responsibility and, of course, as a mission of the Catholic Church and also of the different congregations, and at the same time, the practical reality that you have to survive according to your needs. Fourth is the curriculum development that responds to the students' needs. And we can be proud of the fact that the Catholic schools were the vanguard, where they were the first to feel this. They were the first to make innovations in their own curriculum. The reason being, with the government, change is a little bit slow because of the different bureaucracy that is in place. Whereas in Catholic education, it could be implemented faster. So the Catholic schools have to grapple with curriculum development that responds to the needs of the time, and then external analysis to make Catholic education effective and responsive to the industry demands. So you just don't, create a department, for example, for hospitality, for hotel and restaurant management in an area that doesn't have that industry. When the predominant industry would be sugar industry or perhaps aquaculture, you just don't give an education that is not fitted in that locality. And so again, Catholic schools were the first to look into the external factor of education. Then we have the internal review of the Catholic schools in terms of leadership structure and management to better run the school. And we know that SEAP had programs for these, leadership programs in order to help these Catholic schools to effectively retool their management and leadership structure. Also, Catholic schools had to grapple with the fact that they do not live in a vacuum. They are part of society, and therefore social involvements were analyzed. And the Catholic schools also have to be consistent in their social involvements according to the church teachings. So I have seen that also SEAP has programs for this in order to guide schools according to the social issues that they will take, how to take it, and how to position themselves in these debates. Developing the Internet of Things, I mean. So Catholic schools now are in the forefront of developing the Internet of Things as it faces 21st century educational realities. So again, I guess SEAP helped a lot when they lobbied for affordable softwares for Catholic schools. And that would be a great help for mission schools and for Catholic schools that are struggling to survive. They might look grandiose externally, having good buildings, okay, nice uniforms. They have their school buses, but funds are of a different matter. How to operationalize the schools. It's not just about, facilities. It's also about income. So in the end, economic matters in this regard. So any help, such as being up to date with regard to technological software of the 21st educational system is, something that the Catholic schools will be thankful. And of course, it's always nice to have an organization that looks forward and, anticipates the changes in education in general. And probably last, being true to its mission of proclaiming the good news in its campuses. Okay, so Catholic schools do not only teach children to be good citizens or to be, equipped in their jobs, they also teach them the Catholic faith, most importantly. And we have to thank many Catholic schools who, even if the trend now is to disregard, meta stories or meta narratives, meaning foundational sources of how to live a good life. The Catholic schools still persist on this, and some of their students would react. But thanks to the persistence, Catholic tradition and Catholic faith is handed to the next generation. My own experience with the schools run by sisters, especially, okay? And sisters insisting on masses, confession, and retreats and recollections, even at the protest of their students. They just barge head on. At that time, the students would really feel that they are being oppressed, their autonomy not respected, But when they grow up, whom will they thank? Because of the insistence for Catholic education, the sisters. When they grow up, they realize that they are better because of the persistence of these sisters. Okay, so kudos to the mission schools, to the struggling schools, and even to the schools that are doing okay, who insists on traditioning, on passing the Catholic faith to the next generation, especially to their Catholic students. Okay, so having said that, but we have to face the fact that from the American times, we are now at the present time, with the pandemic hitting hard, private schools, I'm sure that the number has been reduced. Okay, so we have heard that Angelicum School in Iloilo is closing. We have the College of the Holy Spirit, okay, quite an old school, closing because of monetary issues during the time of pandemic. So they just can't keep up operation. So with 442 years of existence, starting from the first Catholic school opened by the Augustinian missionaries in Cebu after the arrival in 1565, Catholic education evolved to be a great social, economic, cultural, and religious force in the country's history. Okay. Socially, it paved the way for many students to move upwards in society. Its brand of education and the dedicated shepherding of its administrators gave rise to well-formed and informed students who later carved a name for themselves in society. Its scholars made for some less privileged but gifted students to finish studies in a strict but caring environment where where the total person is educated, made some of the less fortunate students to also go socially upward. Okay? And this was because of the mission that the Catholic schools have. Economically, the Catholic schools' impact on the economy of the place where they are located is something not yet studied, but is so real. Let me just illustrate. I was educated on my high school years in a Catholic school. My elementary years was one of public education. And I would say in the 70s, the public schools could, stand toe in toe with Catholic schools education. The teachers were really very, very good. Until now, I guess, but the dedication of those teachers at the time was tremendously amazing. There was no computer, so they have to write their lesson plans manually, and they do it every school year, and so they really are, uh, veteran. Uh, but when I was in high school, that would be the St. Paul's School of Barotac Nuevo. Okay, our town is a third-class town, and but fast forward, it is now almost a first-class town. You will see a lot of activities economically. Houses begin to sprung up that are concrete, beautiful, not the typical Nipa huts. And when you ask these new houses, uh, they are the houses of graduates. Majority of them are graduates of St. Paul. I'm not saying that the graduates of the public schools are not successful, but many St. Paul graduates later on turn out having good jobs or become entrepreneurs in their own right in our town. And so it lifted up the economic activity of the place, and because of the greater buying power that thereby stimulated the local economy. So education really was a factor in the transformation of my town. And so we probably could make a study of how Catholic schools impacted the social and economic, reality of the place where they are. And I would not be surprised if they played a major role in that. The graduates equipped to face the challenges of higher education and later the demands of work became successful in their field and brought much economic capacity to their respective places due to greater buying power, thereby stimulating the local economy. Culturally, it has enriched the nation with its contributions on the arts, scientific research and social sciences, sports, and the preservation of ancient cultural artifacts of the Philippines. You can find these artifacts in the museum of our older Catholic schools. Okay, sports. The big three are slugging it out, okay, especially during NCAA, okay, Ateneo, uh, Nasal, and UST. Okay, trumping, of course, the public schools, UP, etc. We are not rebelling at the expense of public schools. But let me just say that we do our own contribution in sports, scientific on research and social sciences. Catholic schools tend to, uh, give a good formation to their professors, sending them abroad for studies, etc. To later on return and contribute the research on the intellectual, deposits of the nation. Of course, the arts. We have fine arts, St. Paul's. We have UST, Ateneo, and uh, another female school where they have very good fine arts. Uh, I forgot the name. But anyway, so culturally, the Catholic school is a force in the Philippines. And as it seeks to inculcate the Catholic faith in traditional all Catholic students, the Catholic schools play a major role in the transmission of the faith to younger generation. Their insistence on prayer before and after class, I don't know if it is still done now, but in my time, it is the rigor. My goodness, every class that we have to stand up, greet our teachers, and then start praying the Our Father. And then after the class, we have to stand up and pray again, a closing prayer. And the sisters will roam around to see to it that this is being done. The Rosary Month, okay, that schools celebrated, especially Catholic schools, the sponsored masses, where we are taught how to respond to the different parts of the Mass. And then we sing, we offer, okay, First Communion and confessions, retreat and recollections, and many other religious activities help preserve the predominantly Catholic faith of the country. Truly, the Catholic Education Ministry of the Catholic Church in the Philippines has come a long way. It continues to innovate with the times, facing new challenges heads on. It can better face the challenge now that the community of Catholic schools have been established thanks to the initiatives of CAP, we have the PAS School, the PACOCOA, and the likes that allows these Catholic education institutions to be resilient with the passing of the times. So with that, I will end my presentation and thank you for your patience.
Dep Ed, I just got back. I'm back now, I'm back.
The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in school closures all across the globe. But even in these uncertain times, education must continue.
From Duterte, it says he won the
Are we ready for a one-sided
Through this method, teachers deliver lessons outside the traditional classroom setup.
As the leading provider of e-learning materials in the country, Tech Factors Incorporated is committed in helping you and your students experience positive teaching and learning environment inside or even outside the physical classroom.
the Tech Edu will not anymore have to take classes with our students. Tech Factor is can convert to Tech Edu. And I'm happy because they agree to that proposal. So, we have scheduled trainings already for our teachers.
The way Tech Factors are handling their schools and the teachers is very accommodating and very commendable because they are there from time to time whenever we need guidance and help in terms of the LMS, in terms of the content.
Congratulations for coming up with very good, effective, relevant, and useful learning materials.
Tech Factors is continuously finding ways to adapt and to adjust in this new normal. I am convinced that being partners with TFI is a big help in this time of new normal.
Tech Factors Incorporated, making learning a great experience. For more information, visit us at www.techfactors.com.
Okay, we are back, and thank you very much, Father Bitoy, for a very informative, comprehensive presentation. I would like to greet Sister Marisa Viri, the CEAP President. She's also watching us and the webinar, and she made a comment saying, from the talk of Father Bitoy, we can do a lot of research activities. A lot of things can be done. I also would like to greet other members of the Board of Trustees of CEAP. We have Father Tom P. Avila Jr. watching live from the Diocese of Tagum Educational System. And he is thanking Father Jose Jonathan for a very comprehensive and scholarly presentation. Mabuhay ang Catholic education. Father June Estoque, watching us live from Cabarros Catholic College in Sipalay City, Negros Occidental. And we also have the former president of Miriam College, Dr. Loretta N. Castro. She said Miriam College, then called Malabo Normal School and later Maryhill College, was also started in 1926 by the American Missionary Congregation, the Maryhill Sisters, upon the invitation of Archbishop O'Doherty. A bit of history there too, of Father Bitoy. I also would like to greet Father Jobert Villasis from Aklan Catholic College is also watching, and other members of the Board of Trustees of CEAP and other officers. We have a lot of wonderful feedbacks here, Father, and comments. Mr. Honesto S. Bermudo III said, very comprehensive presentation. Salamat, Father Bitoy. And Ma'am Alicia Javier, very nice, informative, and comprehensive talk. Thank you so much, Father Bitoy, for an excellent sharing. We hope we can get a copy of your share. God bless you in your ministry. This will be posted in the CEAP Facebook website. You can actually download it from there. And then Hilda Villador, very good, comprehensive, and relevant presentation, Father Bitoy, CMF. It gave a very glimpse of our history and where we could locate our own historical journey, especially looking back at the gift of faith that we value so much. And then we also have one here from Nonili E. Valeros. Thank you, Father, for a very detailed presentation. God bless. And then Mr. Peter Baltazar, thanks for a comprehensive discussion on the history of Christian education in the Philippines, Father Bitoy. So we have a lot of wonderful comments coming from our listeners, participants, and those who are also involved in Catholic education. Now, I'm going to greet the others in the course of our session. But I'd like to welcome everyone to the question and answer portion of this webinar. Before we proceed, may I just remind you again that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. One of the questions sent to us has something to do with the e-certificate. Yes, you will be given, but only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link is already posted in the comment section of this page and on our Facebook page. Again, please note that the link will be live only from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. I repeat, only from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. Kindly access the link and then complete the evaluation form, send it, and then you will receive your e-certificate in 3 to 5 days. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form for you to receive your certificate of attendance. Please note also that the PowerPoint slides of all webinars will be made available at the CEAP website, www.ceap.org.ph, ready for downloading. So the materials of the past webinars, we are all there, and we will also upload the ones used today. Let us now begin our question and answer portion. We have some questions here from Elisa Gomez, Father. Which do you think has a good influence in our Catholic education? The Spaniards or the Americans, Father?
Okay, so with regard to influence on Catholic education, I guess they're all interrelated. We could not say that one is, good, the other is not so good, because the Americans built on the achievements of the Spanish, of the Spanish regime, and therefore, whatever good American Catholic education system later on gave to the country, it's because of what happened in the past. So for me, there is a continuum of goodness. We can also, there is a continuum of lack that must be remedied if you look at how history is progressing from the pre-colonial to the American to the present time. And therefore, for me, in totality, the good that we have now is a product of what had been initiated during the Spanish time, during the American time, and the things that we do in order to correct whatever faults they have in the system at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. I'd like to pick up what you mentioned, Father, because one of the comments made was during the Spanish time, there was no public school system. That was what was mentioned. But if we make use of your input, we can say that the public school system actually started with the Spanish, and during the Spanish. However, the way it was handled was quite different because the public school system was handled by the private schools and probably by the church, probably because the nature of things back then. I remember when I was studying at UST, we were told that the Ministry of Education, in fact, during the Spanish time was UST, and a lot of the records of schools records have been kept at the UST. And probably the Americans simply polished this and brought in what it has already been doing back in the States so that the public school system has become really wide in scope and in coverage. So I must agree, Father, what we have today built on what we had in the past. The American educational system also built on what the Spaniards also built during their time.
Yes.
That's the question. We have another question, Father. This is coming from Alicia Javier. He says, Father Bitoy, thank you so much for your excellent sharing. True enough that the contribution of Catholic education in our country in the lives of the Filipino people is great. And it is very sad when we hear some of the Catholic schools are closing. My question is, does CEAP or does the Catholic Church or even other big Catholic schools have programs to help the dying Catholic schools? I think I can answer this, Father.
Yes,
Bitoy.
yes, you can answer that.
Yeah. Earlier on, when I was introducing the webinar, I mentioned something about Kapatiran Kamagong. CEAP has been trying to help small mission schools, especially financially. But in other programs, of course, we've been giving trainings and everything to capacitate our small mission schools. But the direction that CEAP currently is pursuing sees something about consortium, trying to help and share the resources of big schools, small schools, and trying to bring everyone together so that we all will survive, so that no Catholic school is left behind. So, in other words, as far as the question of Ma'am Alicia Javier is concerned, yes. And that is what CEAP is all about, no? To push and to capacitate all member schools in whatever way the association can, and to connect each other so that we can share our resources. So I hope, Ma'am Alicia, I was able to answer your question. But most, if not all, of our programs in CAP are actually directed towards helping our member schools. That's for sure. So we have another question, Father Bitoy, from Mary Lavender. In relation to 500 years of Christianity, where really was the first Mass? Where really did the first Mass take place? Because there are many researches, some in Massaw, Mindanao, Limasawa in Southern Leyte, and certain places in Samar. As a historian, Father, how do you answer this question?
Okay. In terms of documents, which is very important in a scientific historical research, the oldest document claiming that the first Mass really happened in Cebu can be found in the archives of the Recoleto School of Theology. There is a book written by the missionary that was in 1634 or 1637, I guess, which categorically states that the first Mass happened in Cebu, Limasawa in Cebu. And therefore, without any other evidence, documentary evidence that contradicts it, the scholarly agreement is that it happened in Cebu. Now, the problem with people claiming that it happened in Mazawa, somewhere in Mindanao, is they presented circumstantial evidences. They don't have documentary evidences. And that is something hard to accept because you have documents as early as the 17th century already stating that the mass happened in Cebu. So the weight of evidence is, greater in documentary evidences rather than in circumstantial evidences. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. So you made it clear, Father, the first Mass took place in Cebu. Father, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Thank you. Because there have been a lot of debates. In fact, I think that the CBCP Commission on Cultural Heritage has also been trying to settle the issue because there are claims from groups saying that the first Mass took place here and the first Mass took place there. So the CBCP has been working on this. More or less related to where the first Mass took place, I'd like to ask your Father this issue because every time before when I would take Cebu Pacific, when I would fly from Dumaguete to Manila, they would have fun games. And one of the questions raised in their fun games is about the oldest existing school in the country today. There are claims that it's the University of San Carlos, which is the oldest existing school, and not University of Santo Tomas. But there was one historian who clarified 10 years ago saying that the school that was built in that same location of USC in Cebu, I think, was closed and was established by another congregation. Can you say something about this, Father? To clarify this among us.
It's basically the question of continuity. Right. And therefore, in terms of longest continuity, that honor will go to University of Santo Tomas. There's no question that there were schools ahead of the University of Santo Tomas, but in terms of its longevity, its continuous operation, it's University of Santo Tomas.
Can you further explain, Father, what happened? Like, what school was there prior to USC that was built and that was operating in the same location in Cebu? You mentioned something about Colegio de San Ildefonso. Was that the one?
Yeah, in Cebu. Yes. Yeah. Let me see. There's a school. I'm not really, I have not studied it in depth, but I read all about the controversy because it was also elevated in the CBCP. But the what you call this? The reasoning is that school, if I'm not mistaken, it is operating also in Intramuros right now. I just don't have the name. No? That it was not linked to the early school that was established. And that is the reason why, in terms of continuity, it could not claim to be the oldest school.
So in other words, Father, there was a school established, but then it closed.
It closed.
Yeah. And then after several centuries, USC was established by the SVDs. So prior to that, another congregation opened up a school in the same location in Cebu, where the University of San Carlos is, but then it closed.
Yes. University of San Carlos. Yeah, that's the one.
And then later on, the SVDs opened up. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father. Just wanted to clarify because sometimes, like in the fun games of Cebu Pacific, they would mention this, and then sometimes you get confused. We have another question from Evangeline Nakila. Thank you, Father Bitoy, for the comprehensive information of the journey of Catholic education all through the centuries. However, there was no mention of how the RVM schools came into the history of Philippine education way back in the 17th century, founded by our founders, Venerable Ignacio del Espiritu Santo. Can you say something about, probably this is Nakila.
Yeah. I'm very sorry that I could not, present a comprehensive, picture of Catholic education because, of course, there were some great schools, Catholic schools, that are operational until now that were founded during the Spanish and also the American times. I forgot to mention the Maryhill School, which is now Miriam School, in that regard. I guess it's just the limitation of the time. I don't want to make the presentation so, so boring that, limited also the presentation that I wanted. Perhaps if I will be asked to write an article about it, I can incorporate all these, schools. Of course, the RBM played a great role in the education of our women the day that they were established until now. Probably this homegrown congregation have done a lot also in the area of the economic upliftment, not only of the women, but also the places where they.
Meron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father Bitoy. I would like to acknowledge as well the presence of Sister Fejero Diaz, RVM, from Notre Dame RVM College of Cotabato. As I was listening to your presentation, Father, I realized the function of the school during the time of the Spanish colonizers was to train pupils as members of the Christian society and not to help them improve themselves in the material world. Why would this perspective influence the way education would be carried out during these times? Why would pupils not be helped in terms of improving themselves in the material world? Does this also have something to do with the perspective of the time, which was focused more on the spiritual dimension of existence and somehow not giving quite importance to the material aspect of one's life? Your comment, Father.
Okay, so it is a mixture of first political policies. Okay? I think that an economically equipped, Filipino would later on ask for independence from the mother country, and that is something that, of course, in the political world is to be avoided as much as possible. And secondly, the spiritual ethos of the time, how people think in the spiritual realm. And that is sacrifice was extolled. Okay. The non-pursuit of material wealth is very much the popular notion of the time. You can see that even in literature, religious literature, how it is nice to suffer and be identified with the suffering Christ. That's why one of the icons of our Catholicism would be the Poong Nazareno, the suffering Christ, but one who suffers with dignity. So you see that the king is a suffering king. And of course, I guess there is not so much job that the Filipino can enter during those times. The Spaniards who are present in our country can aptly fill these positions. And therefore, it is not much of an incentive on the part of students. Thank you.
So, in other words, Father, the focus of education during the Spanish times was evangelization. And when the Americans came, they added another dimension, which was the improvement of life. Although during the Spanish times, I don't want to be historically off, but during the Spanish times, I like to believe there was great concern as well for the uplift of Filipino life and way of life. But the emphasis was really more on evangelization and doctrine, because I think that was like what you mentioned. This was probably the mandate given to them by Spain when they came to the Philippines, aside from, of course, colonizing the islands.
Yeah, you're right on that, Father, because during the Spanish time, there really was a social, cultural, and economic upliftment as well. First, with regard to agriculture, the missionaries introduced a lot of crops to the Filipinos and taught them how to farm better. Okay, and on the social side, we became a closely knitted, society, not separate barangays. We become more cohesive as a nation, and we were trained in the ways of, let's say, European way, clothing, even of behaving in meal time or in social interactions, or even on the way we dress. So we were uplifted in a way, but it is not a kind of material upliftment that the Americans wanted us to have. So when the Spaniards focused on the religious training of their pupils to make them good Christian members, the Americans brought in vocational technical courses that is geared towards the economic upliftment of the students. Okay? Now, as I said, uh, were the Spaniards bad and the Americans good in this regard? It's always a kind of continuum. So we build from the achievements of our foreparents. So we stand on the shoulders of the American educators. It's probably just the point of view that they brought that gave one emphasis on this aspect, which is the formation of the human person, and the Americans on the economic benefit of education. Thank you.
So in other words, Father, while during the Spanish times, the direction was evangelization, there also was an honest effort at uplifting lives of Filipinos by the introduction of agriculture and other related fields and industries.
Yes. I'm sitting on some of the thesis defense in the Recollected School of Theology, and most of my students would look into the history of their congregation, the Recollecteds, Augustinians. You will see a lot of benefits that these missionaries brought into the community where they were sent. Industries, sugar industry, leather industry, and many things besides. So it's amazing that evangelization is the primary priority, but there was no neglect also of the economic side, although that was not the emphasis at all.
Thank you, Father. No wonder evangelization has always been pushed. Even Pope Francis was always saying, I like what he said last week during his mass at the St. Peter's Basilica, when he mentioned about how Filipino women are smugglers of faith, because wherever they go to work, they sow the faith, and which is really true. But that leads me to the next question, which is forwarded to us by Sister Rodora Tabamo of St. Joseph High School of Dagami. She would say, thanks for the great information, Father Bitoy. But the question is, why must the church strive to bring the gospel message into all dimensions of life, much more to our students in the public schools or in the public?
Come again, Father.
Okay. So Sister Rodora Tabamo of St. Joseph High School of Dagami would like to thank you for the great presentation you made. But she would like to ask this question: why must the church strive to bring the gospel message into all dimensions of life, much more to our students in the public?
Okay, sige. So the proclamation of the gospel in all the dimensions of a human person's life is a mandate from Jesus Christ himself. So go and preach the gospel to all the nations, baptizing them in the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. So it is a gospel mandate. And I guess the reason why we exist is precisely to carry out the command of the Lord. But why is it that we are not contented to proclaim it in our own sphere? That would be the Catholic schools. Why do we reach out to public schools? Simply because majority of those in public schools are also Catholics. It cannot be denied that the Philippines is 86% predominantly a Catholic nation. Since public schools does not have a provision for religious instructions, it is therefore our task as a Catholic school to do it. And I know that it's quite hard because the public school have their own system, they have their own horarium in that sense, and to insist on an instruction would probably eat up the hours that they intend for other activities. And so it's always uh, a kind of relationship that must be established first. If you are friends, they might probably allow you. If not, there would be a kind of animosity. And even if you succeed in going to the school to proclaim, to teach catechism, you will find a lot of obstacles. So what we have here is the separation of the public and the religious sphere at play. And what must we do in order to overcome this separation? Well, first, we need to have a good, relationship with the school regulators. Shed, decks, Adept Ed, for example, and probably CHED. Secondly, friendship among us and the public school administrators, principals, and they can at their own level decide whether to allow you or not, and also teachers. So it's a mixture of political initiative and at the same time relational initiative. But for me, the best thing for us to do is to look beyond the school setting and have our own catechesis outside school hours, probably Saturday or Sunday. It just dawned on me that perhaps as part of the Catholic schools, contribution to evangelization, during Saturdays or Sundays, they can come up with a curriculum where they will have a school for catechesis, especially for those who are, those who are interested to do so on the elementary, on the high school, college, or adult level. It might add a burden to their workforce and also to their economy because you have to pay. But I guess a good program can be done out of that. We need not depend only on school hours because we have weekends that we can utilize. And if we do a good planning out of this, I guess we can have a system where we can educate students outside our schools, those in the public schools, in the rudiments of the faith. Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much, Father. I also welcome your thoughts on that because a lot of our Catholic schools, in fact, in the provinces are really pushing for that program. And in fact, they send their students to public schools to also teach catechism, which is a good act. But you were right in saying we need to establish a good relationship with people in these schools for us to be allowed to get inside and to carry out the catechetical program of the church. Lately, Father, Philippine education has been dismally performing in TIMSS and PISA. Right? Okay, but in your presentation, I realized Filipinos have really been good in terms of education, in terms of a lot of aspects, based on the literacy rate, which was fairly high during the pre-colonial times. In your study of history, Father, what do you think is the reason why the Philippines' quality of education has been consistently going down over the years?
Okay, Father. I guess the main factor is politics. Okay, because the government has a greater weight on how education will turn in our country. I would probably put the the greater burden on government. There is not much support. If you look historically after the Americans, there's not much support in education afterwards. It dwindled because the money was shifted to other needs other than education, of course. And the politicization of education in the Philippines really hampered its growth. And in this area, thanks be to Catholic schools that are free from the meddling of politics, they were able to forge ahead with very good, education system. They probably some of the bright spots. But the fact is, we could not compete with other nations whose schools are well endowed by their government because after all, this is economic play. We might have a lot of goodwill, we might have the missionary zeal to teach, but at the end of the day, we need to eat. We have biological needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. And now lately they say travel is also a human need. And where do you get that? Where will teachers get that? It's to their profession. They might not ask much, but they have to be provided with decent, with decent pay in order for them to joyfully do what they are happy to do, that is to teach. So the quality of education plummeted because of lack of funds, and the lack of funds happened because of the politics of our nation, and most of all, the meddling of politicians in our school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. In other words, if we look at the entire, we see a lot of factors coming in that are influencing the way education is delivered. And because of these factors, somehow the delivery of education has been badly affected. And one of the factors you mentioned was politicking and politicizing education in the Philippines. I hope that can be properly addressed in the coming years so that we will be able to take ourselves a little higher, in the educational ladder so that we can truly give quality education to our kids.
Father, I have I have little faith that the kind of politics that we will have as of the moment will turn around for good. So what I would rather advocate is for us, Catholic schools, to find other ways how to counteract this lack in our system, because we have more independence from political, games, and therefore we can forge ahead with programs that would enhance our education in the country. That would be a very good contribution. And I would commend Catholic schools who, despite lack of resources, really have done very well. I had been to mission areas. I have seen the schools of St. Paul, the RBMs, for example, the Jesuits even in Olotanga before, the Claretians in Basilan, and many other religious congregations. So labor silently in the missionary schools, yet they contributed a lot in nation building because they turn out students who are equipped despite the handicap of economy. And I guess instead of lamenting, we have to do something about it. And I'm glad that Saya is trying to do something about it. I remember a conversation with Miss Cruz before that there was a plan to put an endowment fund again so that the less fortunate schools, I mean the small Catholic schools, could be subsidized out of this fund. I hope it's moving forward and everybody is cooperating on this, because if we rely on our government right now, I don't think we will get the kind of support that we need. But it doesn't mean we don't have to press and stop lobbying. We have to. We have to tell them in season, meaning if they are friendly, if we have a friendly ear, or out of season, or a deaf ear coming from the government, we have to tell them our advocacy that education is one of the pillars of society. so that at least they are aware, so that at a favorable time, we might get what we want. That is good support coming from the government, because after all, the kind of education that we do is a social responsibility. It's the responsibility not only of the church, but more so of the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was very positive and very true. If I may pick up what you said about the endowment fund, I think Kapatirang Kamagong Fund is our way of helping small mission schools. That also was mentioned a while ago by one of our participants in the webinar, asking if there's a way if CAP is also looking at helping small schools. Yes, in fact, all our programs are aimed at helping all our member schools, big and small, but all the more the small mission schools, especially located in far-flung areas. And we've been trying our best, but that's true. To be self-sustaining is really the best weapon, because we can always be counting on the help that can be coming from like government, because of course government also has its own agenda, and we may not necessarily be included in the agenda of government because they have their public schools to take care of and the state colleges and universities. But nevertheless, we try to pull ourselves out. But one comment, Father, that is also very positive is when you mention Catholic school, it always is associated, equated with quality, because there always is rigor and discipline. It may not be the same quality that we see in the more popular, famous schools, but there always is quality in any Catholic school, in any Catholic education. And I think that we can give back that honor. We can give back to the men and women who are working behind the scenes, who are often not seen and heard, and who are really struggling to work despite low salaries, working in the provinces and elsewhere, and who continue to serve the church this way. And we thank all of the men and women who have been the strong forces behind Catholic education in the Philippines. Despite low salaries, despite all the difficulties, they continue to serve because they believe in Catholic education. One final point, Father, before we go is, I'd like to ask you, Sister Marisa Viri, the CEAP president currently, mentioned about the possibility of exploring research activities based on the presentation you have just made. What do you think would be the aspects for research that we can pursue as a CEAP in the coming years, especially something pertaining to like Catholic education, history, and everything? What aspects in research can we possibly pursue in the coming years?
Okay. I have told some of the St. Paul sisters about this because it was just my observation after so many years outside my town. I was asking them if they could make a research on the impact of the Catholic school, that would be the St. Paul School of Theology, in the economic upliftment of our community. Because from a third-class community, we're now entering almost into the first-class community because of the economic upliftment brought about by the new generation. And when I was looking around, the majority of them come from St. Paul's School. So my question was, what was it in the education of St. Paul that allowed all these students to graduate college, to pursue a good career, and become successful? So if you can commission the impact of Catholic school in the economic life of the community or of the country in general, because I knew for a fact many of our, taipans, of our industrialists, they were schooled in one of the big threes, either Ateneo, La Salle, or UST, and many countless other businessmen who did well, who are probably not so well known, but are successful in a way. They were educated by Catholic schools. And if we can find out how much we have contributed in the economic upliftment of the country, perhaps it would be another feather in the cap of Catholic education. Thank you.
Actually, Father, honestly, we've been talking about, when you mentioned about an impact study on of Catholic education on the life of the nation and everything, I was smiling because I just recalled what we have always been talking about since 2016. As far as my involvement in the board is concerned, since 2016, we've always been talking about the possibility of pursuing a research on the impact of Catholic education on the life of the nation. We're doing something like that now. We're starting to gather data to be able to establish, especially on the occasion of the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines and on the occasion of CEAP's 80th year. Hopefully, we'll be able to come up with something concrete in response to the call to find out what the impact is of Catholic education in the Philippines but before the end of the year. Hopefully, we'll be able to come up with one so that we will be able to encourage our schools to do some more. After all, despite all the hardships and the difficulties, we were able to produce really good citizens of the country, those that are contributing to the progress of the nation and working for the welfare of the Filipino people. So with that, yes, Father, would you like to say, with that, I'd like to thank you, Father, for some final words.
Yeah, just a last note on that, Father. Perhaps also you can look into the impact of Catholic school education on the transformation of the mujer indígena, of the native Filipino women. Of course, no, the empowerment of the women in terms of education, the Philippines is pioneer to that. So we have the RVMs, for example, to thank for. Then later on, the Maryhill Sisters, Miriam College, and then also Saint Scholastica, and the Beaterios, no, Santa Catalina, etc. We could not mention them all here because of the time frame, but perhaps CAAP could also look into women empowerment coming from Catholic schools education. That would be timely because that is now the ethos of the time. It will also be a good addition to your research. Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much, Father, for a very insightful presentation. The participants have really been enjoying your presentation and are grateful to you for preparing a very comprehensive input on the history of Catholic education in the Philippines. I would like to continue greeting some of our participants and listeners. Sister Joy Cajegas, USS, School Principal of Sacred Heart Academy of Lupao Incorporated in Lupao, Nueva Ecija. So we have a lot. And we also have we have a lot. Ivan Mislang, Father Bitoy, I was one of your students. Mars Inchong Belo, we do practice pa rin po having opening and closing prayers in between classes. And then Honesto S. Bermudo III, Evangeline Nakila, and then Yoy Banatlao. We have a lot of them from all over the country, and we thank you all for participating. We're running out of time. I cannot read all your names, but continue supporting CEAP webinars. We have another one coming up on Thursday. It's for child protection, and I hope it's going to be for 3 consecutive days. I hope you can also take part. And then next month, we will have our National Day of Prayer as a CEAP on the occasion of our 80th and the 500 years of Christianity. We will also have a webinar on vaccination to educate our schools and our teachers and everyone and all the stakeholders. So I hope you'll continue to support our webinar. Now, so we have listened to Father Bitoy, and I would like now to invite everyone to listen to the response coming from our young people. Now, we have 2 responses coming from young people to the challenge and call of Father Bitoy. Let us now listen to this.
There are strings attached in every heart, every soul, every eye. like a marionette, well-ornamented knots thread. Prevent the twists and tangles. It is time for us to try to test out our principles, virtues, and sing hymns, not better left accent.
Hayaan mo maging matapang tayo ngayong oras ng ating kagagawagan. Hayaan mo maging malakas tayo ngayong oras ng ating kahilingan. Magpahinga ka kung kinakailangan, pero huwag kang susubo. Bigyan natin ng dahilan na bumangon ng susunod na henerasyon ng kinabukasan.
Once thought, and still must be, breathe compassion, to paint the world with the colors of grace, strive with hope, while keeping in mind that we are not alone. Gaze with charity, so our eyes will reflect every weak and bare face. Reach with humility, and be able to give what is needed, what is wanted, and what is long overdue. All we need is to lead. All we need is to live.
Hindi maaaring makalimutan ng isipan ng puso ininuwan ang mga karanasan na natutunan at tumatak sa ating pagkakao. Kung kaya't kay, magising, mag-ingay, magdasal, magmahal. Tayo ang kabataan, ang laman ng hinaharap, ang pag-asa ng bayan.
Make a change. Be a canvas. Let our weapon be love. When clouds shroud our day, make an endless night. Let's look beyond. Find that spark. Stretch our wings and discover what is above. And believe that we will always be guided when we set our course for flight.
Ano ang gagawin natin? Tumayo, lumakad, magsalita, maging boses ng pagbabago. Ibahagi ang mga natutunan na naranasan sa mundo ng walang pasubali. 500 taon na nung ating nakamit ang biyaya ng mananampalataya. Tayo biniyayaan upang maging biyaya sa iba at sa mundo.
Let our language be love.
Dinggin ang mensahe at tularan ng halimbawa ni Kristo. Naway ito ang mga kwento na ating iiwan sa puso ng bawat tao. Mga kwentong nagsisilbing ilaw sa atin at sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Binigyan niya tayo ng walang pasubali. Bakit tayo nag-aalinlangang magbahagi?
Let our faith be the gift that keeps on giving for generations to come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christian Lagmay and Ms. Kiana Rivera, two of the youngest members of the CEP National Secretariat, for your response through performance poetry. Last week, the Holy Father in his Mass at the Vatican hailed Filipinos. Thank you for the joy you bring to the world. The question, however, is, can we share the same joy to fellow Filipinos today when life has been made difficult by the health crisis that has changed the flow of life and the dynamics of human relations? How can Catholic schools today become channels of the joy that is rooted in the gospel? The Philippine Catholic School Standards for Basic Education, in the defining characteristics of Catholic schools, clearly reiterates Catholic schools' participation in the evangelizing mission of the Church in these words. Evangelization is a proclamation, witness, and transmission of the gospel given to humanity by our Lord Jesus Christ. Education is an essential element of evangelization. Through its educational activity, the Catholic school promotes and aids in the evangelizing mission of the Church in a unique and privileged manner. In its work of educating the whole person, the Catholic school guides men and women to human and Christian perfection and helps them to arrive at the fullness of Christian life towards the interior transformation and renewal of humanity. Maturing in Christian faith comes only from personally interiorizing Jesus' message in our Filipino ways of thinking, loving, and valuing. As we look forward to another 500 years of evangelizing, may we not lose the steam we need to sustain the joy of the gospel in us, even as we face challenges nonstop. Before we end, I would like to thank our web host, Tech Factors, for being our wonderful partner for this webinar. I also would like to sincerely thank Father Bitoy for that wonderful presentation, and to all of you for generously participating in our webinar this morning. I hope you continue to support CEAP activities and webinars. After all of these activities are designed to capacitate our schools, to assist everyone, and to support the mandate of Catholic education. Join us again on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. for our CEAP Child Protection Summit. On behalf of our President, Sister Marisa Viri, RVM, and the CEAP Board of Trustees, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, the Executive Director and the National Secretariat, this is Father Iking Balongag saying thank you. May you have a blessed and meaningful observance of the Holy Week. And together with the blessings of 500 years, let us ask our loving God to bless us during these difficult times with his healing and loving presence. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless us all. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Servisyong totoo.